Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where we are all learning together to peace out, right? Well, I know I am. Are you? We're working on that together, right? I'm still trying to find a button, but there's still not. There's not a button. That's okay. We have a verse that says, "Keep bringing it to Him, and giving Him our anxieties, our crazy thoughts, our fears, and take on His peace." Right? Because His peace is already here. It's always here. There's not an off-on button. It's just that we've got to figure out how to keep it on in our brains and let it rain continually in our hearts. It's all on us, right? So, speaking of that, I was thinking about these two stories. I've been thinking about it since yesterday's live Peace Out. I've been thinking about these two stories. I was thinking about, because what did we talked about the spies and Joshua and all of that yesterday. I've been talking about that for a few days, right? And so I was thinking about that story, and then I was thinking about David and Goliath, and I thought about what we are fixing our eyes on. Now, Hebrews tells us to fix our eyes on God, on Jesus, right? The author and the finisher of our faith, right? Hebrews tells us that. Well, and so I was thinking about that. I actually got to that scripture from thinking about these two stories. And I'm like, they seem really far apart. David and Goliath. That's kind of a kid, you grow up knowing that one. Even the world knows the story of David and Goliath. Matter of fact, there's a book called David and Goliath, and it's not a Christian book. It's a secular book, and it's nonfiction, but it's about how people overcame big struggles in their life, whether it was dyslexia or a disability of some sort. And so he even used the connotation of David and Goliath because even the world uses the story of David and Goliath when they have something big, like Goliath, that they want to get through. Now, the difference between how the world uses it and what we can learn from scriptures is that David relied on God, right? He told Goliath, "This day God will give you into my hand," right? So he wasn't by himself. He wasn't just going, "I'm going to take you down." He was like, "God will give you into my hand. You're going down today, but it's because God's going to take you down." And so I was thinking about how David looked at Goliath. David did not give us an account of how big Goliath was. Now, the writer of Samuel did. I believe that's in 1 Samuel 22-ish. And the writer of Samuel, which I think was Samuel, hence the name, wrote how big Goliath was. David didn't say, "Ooh, you're big. you're bigger than I thought." No, he didn't even acknowledge how big Goliath was. He didn't even think about how big he was. Or how tall he was, or how big his shield was. And it actually says he ran onto the battlefield to take down Goliath. It says he ran out there to take down Goliath. He ran out there and he went, "Today you're going to fall because God has got my back. God's going to take you down." And he took a stone and a slingshot to fight a giant. We tease about taking a water gun to a real fight, right? Or charging hell with a water gun, or taking a knife to a gunfight. We tease about, having the right weapon for the fight. But David took 5 stones and a slingshot, and he went out to Goliath, ran out to Goliath, and said, "Today God is going to put you into my hand." He didn't think about how big Goliath was. He wasn't swayed by the things Goliath said. He didn't say, he could have said, "Oh, you're right, never mind," and run away, right? Or said, "You're bigger than I thought you were going to be," or, "Oh, how did I get out here?" No, he just went out there and said, "God's going to take you down today," and took out a rock and a slingshot, hit him in the one spot. He went down, he cut off his head, he won, he was the victor. Then that started the whole series of Saul chasing him, Saul getting jealous, all of those things. But David didn't think about all those things. He looked past Goliath at God. And that's what we have to do, no matter how big our problems are, no matter how overwhelming they seem, no matter how small they seem. We want to look past them and see the God who's going to give us the victory in that circumstance. Because scriptures tell us, Paul told us, that he always leads us into triumph. And I think that's Philippians. Don't quote me on that. But so I thought about David and Goliath. And then I was thinking about the difference in David and Goliath and the 12 spies that went in to spy out the land. Now, God had already given them the land. Now, we can draw that parallel to this. God's already given us peace. God's already given us grace. God's already given us mercy. God had already given them the land, and Moses said, just go look at the land God is giving us. Go spy it out. Look at the land God is giving us. Look at what God's giving us. And only 2 spies did what they were supposed to do, Joshua and Caleb. They came back and said, whoa, the fruit, look at the fruit. It takes 2 men to carry grapes. The fruit is amazing. It's a fertile ground. We can grow stuff. It's got everything we need. It's got water. It's got everything. And 10 spies said, there were these big old giants in the land, and we look like grasshoppers. See, they were seeing themselves through the eyes of their opposition rather than seeing the land through the promise of God. I might have to say that twice, right? Or I might have to go back and watch it. David saw Goliath through the eyes of God and knew that Goliath was coming down. He didn't look at himself. What did he look like to Goliath? He was saying, what does Goliath look like to the God I serve? The 2 spies that came back with positive reports said, look at this land God is giving us. Look at it. This is an amazing land. It's got so much fruit. It's got so much this. It's amazing because they were looking at the land through the promise of God. The 10 spies were looking at themselves through the eyes of the enemy, going, we can't do it. And then they ended up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years but God still gave them the land. That was the thing. God still gave them that same land, but they could have enjoyed that land for 40 years had they just looked at the land through the eyes of the promise of God. And so, but I have to say, okay, I won't put it on you, but I do this all the time. I know what God's promised me. I know I have peace. He gave us peace. All I got to do is let it rain. I know He's given me grace, but I forget to run to Him and go, okay, I need your sufficient grace for today. I need grace for today. I know His mercies were new this morning when I got up at 5 o'clock, by the way. When I got up, His mercies were brand new just for me, just for you, right? God doesn't have a morning, so He don't need new mercies every morning because it's always day to Him. But He made them specifically for us. Does that not just blow your mind? That God prearranged mercies for this day. What is today? March 5th, 2024. He arranged mercies for today. He already gave grace to David before he faced Goliath. He gave His mercy and grace to the children of Israel long before they got to the promised land. He's carried them to the edge of the promised land, and then they just kind of abandoned what God said because they got scared of what they saw. And I have no condemnation, you guys, because when I look at different situations I'm facing, maybe you're looking at different situations you're facing. Thank God we're not facing a real physical Goliath, right? We're not taking a land full of, the physical land full of Goliaths, right? Which if you think about that, the giants that the 10 spies saw were probably the ancestors of the giant David took down in Samuel. Where else would he have come from? He was a giant. They were giants. He had to be in that lineage of giants. All those. So it was the same giants. It was the same family of giants. Everybody's fighting. We all have giants we have to face or maybe you don't. I won't put you in that. Maybe you ain't got no giants. That's some good English for you. It's okay. I taught math. Yeah. Maybe you don't have any giants. Maybe you don't have something big staring you down, going, "I'm going to take you out." Because our problems tend to nag at us, right? I don't know how I'm going to pay this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to this or that, right? And we look at that giant long enough and we'll forget about the God who has us in His hand. So we got to look past the giants. We got to look past the things staring us in the face. We got to look past the things that are mocking us and making us feel like we're a failure, or making us feel like we're not trusting God, or making us feel like fill in the blank with whatever you deal with every day. Got to look past that and go, God's got me. In this situation, God did not say, you'll have my peace in every situation unless your bills aren't paid, or unless you get sick, or unless this, or unless you get divorced, or unless you get married, or unless you get, I don't know. He didn't give any stipulations on any of His promises. He gave us His peace. He gave us His mercy. Is it morning? It's morning. God's mercies are new then for us. That's something we can choose. There's the key word. Choose to walk in. David chose to look past Goliath at God. The 2 spies chose to look at the promise of God rather than the problems in the land. The 10 spies, though, however, chose to look at the giants rather than what God said. Those 10 spies chose to magnify they magnified the giants because they're like, we look like grasshoppers. Those giants didn't come out there and say, ooh, look at them little grasshoppers. they made that up themselves. They made it up in their own imagination. So I just want to encourage you today, and I'm encouraging myself here, by the way, side note, to look past the problem. Look past the giant. The giant's going to be there. The problem's going to be there. But we got to look past what's stalking us, what's trying to get in our brain and distract us from the things, the promises that God has promised us. He's promised us peace. He promised us mercy. He promised us grace. We just got to look past that giant. We say, hey, giant, move over just a little bit, because I'm trying to look at God's grace right there. Yeah, just a little bit. Okay, perfect. Okay, now I can take you down because I got my focus on what God has promised. I got my focus on what he says. And here's my plug for the word. Find a scripture that pertains to your situation, whatever you're dealing with, because we all got all these different things, right? We got all these different things, situations, good, bad, and different. We got all the different things going on. So find a scripture that applies and just memorize it, think about it, meditate on it for the day, for the duration, right? And that's what the 2 spies did. The 2 spies said, God gave us this land. They focused on what God had said. The 10 spies focused on the dire situation and the fight they were going to have to go through to get the promise of God. There's always a fight. There's always a fight to get what God promised us. There's always a fight to take that giant down. But I'm telling you, as long as we keep our eyes on God, what he promised, what he said, keep our minds on the word, fix our eyes on Christ, the author and finisher of our faith, the one who created it and going to complete it. He's going to complete the work he promised, Philippians 1:6. He will finish the work he started. We've got to keep our mind and our hearts on those things and look past the giant at what God said, rather than focusing on the giant, because the giant will take us down if we give them our attention. So let's put our mind on God today. Look past those problems. Focus on the peace he's given us, the grace, the mercy, and get you a scripture. And if you need help finding a scripture, I'm your man. Oh, okay, well, I'm not your man. I'm your woman, because I can help you find a scripture to stand on if you need one. Send me a message or a text, right? Anyway, you guys, peace out. Have a great day. I'll see you again tomorrow.